What's going on? It's Brandon Styles, and today I'm going to show you how to build a very simple React.js application. We're going to be building a to-do list using hooks and all that modern React stuff. Now, why do most people start off with a to-do app? Well, that's because it's a pretty easy app to program that also gets you the main ideas of React, such as working with methods, changing state, updating components, etc., etc. So we're gonna dive in today. I'm gonna show you how to do it, and more importantly, I'm gonna show you how to actually read a React application. So if you don't have the ability to kind of read through an app by looking at it and saying, okay, this does this, blah, 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 it's gonna be a lot harder to write it. So I'm gonna show you how I think of a React app when I'm looking at it, how to read it, and how to kind of figure out what's going on. And again, since it's a to-do app, it's going to be fairly simple to be following along. So we're going to look at things like functional components, we're going to be looking at changing the state, passing props around, etc., etc. So if you've ever wanted to know how to build a React app and actually build an app, and you're the app guy and you're the software developer guy, check this video out. So here I am in VS Code, which is a free code editor or text editor. And again, I'm going to show you how to create a simple to-do app in React. This is not going to be the most optimized thing ever. It's just kind of showing you how React works and how to read a React program. So let's get started. You don't have to install anything if we use the command npx, which basically means go up to the cloud and pull down all the React library framework packages without installing it on our computer. So we need to say create npx, create React app, which kind of gives us a React app boilerplate. And then we can call this whatever we want to. I'm going to call it Brandon's to-do list. And if we look over here, we can see that we are on the root of, in this case, my MacBook Pro. All right. And so to get to that, if you click on Finder, and then you click on this little home button, that is going to be your root. So if you're not sure where this app is going, it's going to go in that root, at least for this. If you wanted to put it on your desktop, we could delete this and we could cd, which means change directory, into our desktop. And now we are in our desktop, which you know because it says my MacBook Pro and then desktop. And now we can do our npx create React app and then call it Brandon's to-do list, and it is going to download it right now for us. It'll just take a second. I'll pause the video while it downloads. Good deal. So that took about 30 seconds. We know it worked because it says happy hacking right here. So the first thing we want to do is cd into the to-do list app folder we just created. Again, if we move to our desktop, we can see it right there, Brandon's to-do list. And if you open it, there's some files that are already in here. So we just need to cd or change directories into that file. So cd Brandon's to-do list. And then if we do these double and marks, yarn start, we can run both those commands at the same time. And it is going to open localhost 3000, which is the default port for React apps built with create React app. And in just a second, it should pop up. So cool. So that's all you need to do to actually open and start a React app, but that's not very helpful. That's not going to get you a lot of stuff done, right? It's just a little spinning icon. So what I want to do is I'm going to combine these two so that we can kind of see what's going on with both. And then I want to open this over here. So I'm going to kill this, and then I'm going to open the file we just created by hitting Command O on a Mac, Brandon's to-do list. It's going to open this up in the file, and then I'm going to hit Command T, or you can open the integrated terminal that comes with VS Code, and again, we want to do yarn start. And it's going to start up our local server so that we can see it over here. So it looks like we're signed on to the internet, but really this is just a local connection, meaning it just kind of loops around on our own computer. No one else could visit this. So the first thing I want to do is download a UI library just to make things look a little bit prettier than the default Chrome, just kind of plain looking elements. All right, it's just going to make it look a little bit flashier, but we're still not going to do a lot of CSS work with this. So I want to open a new tab. I want to go to and type in Shards UI for React. All right, so here's the Shards React documentation. So we want to go to get started, and it tells us to type yarn add Shards React into our terminal. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to open up a new one because we're still in Node. So this is kind of a backend server. So I'm going to type a new terminal. So now we're just using regular ZSH text editor or terminal. I'm going to paste that in. and that is going to start downloading. And in the meantime, this is what we need to do, and it's all we need to do to bring in a component from the Shards React library. This is kind of like Bootstrap, right? It's even got Bootstrap built into it, and it just makes things look a little bit better out of the box so that we don't have to do that much CSS shaping. So I'm going to copy this, and we are ready to get building. So Shards has been added right here too in 10 seconds. Let's go back to our React app. So now let's get to actually coding this damn thing. So I'm going to open up app.js, and here is this program right here. But what we want to do is we want to delete everything in this return bracket right here. So I'm going to delete that. We also want to delete the SVG right here, which is this little spinning icon, because we're not going to use it for this. And now we're ready to build. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in H1, Brandon's to-do list, just so that we can kind of see what's going on. If I click save and come over here to node, and it recompiles, you're going to see Brandon's to-do list. Nice, perfect. All right, so now let's add in and paste in those shard little snippets we just got. Cool, so that's ready. So now we've imported shards and we're ready to be looking good. So again, if you put an alert right here and you say, here's an alert, and you close it right here, then we should, sorry, it needs to be in a fragment wrap. There we go. We should see a little type of alert right here once it compiles. It's compiling right now. I'm going to hit refresh, and then there's the alert. So see, it's got some pre-styling things compared to what it would normally look like, and it's pretty cool. But we don't need that right now. So from Shards React, we don't need an alert, but we do need a container. We want a button. We want a form. We want a form input. And I believe that's it for right now. Now, how did I know to type all that? All you got to do is go to the docs to this right here, and there is everything that you can get. So it can be pretty helpful. So here is how we're going to code a to-do list. So the first thing I want to do is create a container, and let's just give it a class name of to-do list. All right, so there's the first container that's going to hold our list. And then the second container, let's call this, let's give it a class name of to-do input. So this is going to hold our input form where people can type in what to do they want to do. So we want to create a form inside of this. And in this form, we want to have the form input. And then we want to, and I'm just going to make this, since it's JSX, a single component like that. And we want to have a button, and we're going to call it add to do like that. So if I click save, we should now have something working over here, and we do. Instead of having this in just an empty fragment, let's also put this in a container like this too. Oops, there we go, container here. And then come down here and close the container and then format that. And then we want to move all of these in, and we're ready to go. Cool. So everything's kind of centered up, and we've got our to-do list, we've got our input form. We can type stuff there, but when we type stuff, it doesn't do anything, right? In fact, it refreshes the page. So we've got to start making some changes right here. But we've got our basic app UI laid out. And this is what I like to do, kind of design the UI first. You can even create place fillers to kind of help you visualize your program. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we're going to use some state in this app to manage what's put in the input, and also to manage the to-do list so that when we update it, delete to-dos, things like that, it is reflected. So we're going to actually use hooks in this. We're not going to use class-based components. We're going to use function-based components. So the next thing I need to do is we need to come up here, do a little comma, little curly brackets, and we need to type use state. So we're going to use some state hooks in here, which is kind of the new thing to do. So to do that, we're going to first set up our to-do list. And then the next thing we're going to do is set up our input value so that when someone types something in here, we can kind of store it in a local browser cache. Think of it that way. So I'm going to do this. This is how you do that. You do const, and then we're going to set two variables, what we want it to be called. So I just want to call it the to-do list, and then we need to give it a method to update. So the convention is set XYZ. So in this case, it's set to-do list. I just made that up. and then we want to type equals use state, and then we want to initialize that with an empty array just like that. And then we want to set up our input value. Again, the same thing, so we can just kind of copy and paste that if we want to. And we're going to change these to value. Again, this is going to hold the state of the value right here in this input box. And we're going to type set value. So that allows us to update the value state. And then here we want to do an empty string. So that looks good. We're going to save that. So now we've got these. So now we want to set up some methods. So in this to-do list, we want to be able to add a to-do. We want to be able to delete a to-do. And we want to handle the submission of the form. Why do we need to do that? Well, there are some default properties that forms do. For example, when you submit a form, if we click this button right here, it'll refresh the page. We don't want to do that on a single page app, so we need to control a little bit of that. And then the next thing I want to do is just give us some default values up here so we can kind of see what we're working with. So I'm going to come into this array, give us a little space, and we're going to create two objects. So remember, you create an object by doing curly brackets like that. So I want to create two objects, and inside of this object we want our to-do text. So let's just type text. You could type anything. So the first thing I want to do is mow the lawn. And then the second thing I want to do is I want to wash the car, and then maybe even a third to do. So let's have the third to do be take out the trash. All right, so this is our array, and we save that, but we're still not seeing anything over here. Well, that's because we're not actually displaying these on the screen, so we need to kind of iterate over these and iterate over our current state. So to do that, we can come into this container, and we will open it with curly brackets, which means we want to type in a JavaScript expression. So I am going to take our to-do list, which we have up there, and we want to map over it. And we want to pass it two things. We want to pass it a to-do, and I'm just making that up. Really, that's just a piece of open memory for each item or each object in this to-do list right here. And then we want to pass it an index, because you have to have some sort of index or key when you're working with the map method that comes with JSX. All right, and then we're going to pass that using an arrow function into a, let's do a little span. And we want to give this a key of index. You shouldn't always use index. In fact, React encourages you to use index as like a last resort. But just for the sake of this easy to do app, we're going to use index. And in here, we want to type a paragraph that is filled with the text from up here. So again, that's an object in a to-do, right? Because we passed it the to-do here. So we want to type to-do.text to be able to access this, all right? So I'm going to do curly braces, to-do.text. And then also in each of these spans, we want a delete button, all right? So I'm going to type button and then delete. Sorry. Instead of brackets right here, we need to do parentheses. All right, so if we change that to parentheses, we should be good to go. There we go. Now it maps over it, and that's what we've got right here. So instead of a paragraph, just to keep these on the same line, let's change it to span. And then those are on the same lines once I fix the spelling. Cool. And again, that's not great, so let's do a div. Again, this is just to make it look better. Cool, so that's better, all right? But again, we're not gonna style it up. But what happens if we click delete? Nothing happens because we haven't set up the controls for that. Remember, we've kind of commented out the method that we want to add here, delete to do, but we just haven't put anything in there. So with React, you've got to code all of this stuff in by hand, all right? So here's the first thing that we want to do. We want to type something into this input. All right, and we can type something now, but when we click add to do, it doesn't do anything, right? It just refreshes the browser, and it's pointless, all right? So the first thing is I want to come into this form input, and we can do a placeholder. That's just a built-in property, and we can give it a value of type to do here. And then all form inputs need an onChange method, all right, or an onChange property. And this is going to be a JavaScript expression, so we do, or a JSX expression, either way. We do curly brackets, and we need to pass it an event, so we can call it anything. In this case, I'm going to give it the name keyboard stroke, and we're going to pass that in, and we are going to take the keyboard stroke. A lot of times people will type E here, but again, I want to make this very clear. Keyboard stroke dot target dot value, and this should get us the exact key that we typed. So if we type an E, then this should register as an E. All right. Now we want to store this value in the input form. So I'm going to type value, which is a built-in method, built-in property, and we want to give it a dynamic property of value. And again, this is going to be coming from up here. All right. So value is right there. Now we need to do something with this keyboard stroke. We need to set this keyboard stroke value as the actual value for what's being typed in. So we just need to wrap it in a method. And what method do we use? Why, we use the set value right here. So I'm going to type set value, and then we just need to wrap this guy up, and we are good to go. So now anything we type into this change method is going to set that value, right? It's going to set the value of the target value from the keyboard into this piece of state right here. So now we are logging that. Okay, cool. So we've got that. Now what we need to do is we need to handle the form submission. Remember, we need to prevent the refresh of the page, and then we also need to, when we do this, update our to-do list, which is right here. So first off, let's handle the form submission. So if we go to this button, we can type equals submit, and that will kind of double loop us into this form submission, and it won't hurt us. So we can come up to this form, and we are going to type on submit equals, and we want to run a method for this. So we're going to type handle submit. Again, that could be anything. I just made up this method name. Now what is handle submit? Well, now we can create this method. So I'm going to come up here to handle the form submission, and maybe just for hierarchy's sake, we can move it up right there, since that's kind of what we're going to do first, and handle the form submission. So what we want to do is we want to make it a function. So I'm going to call it form const handle submit equals, we want to pass it something maybe. We want to do an arrow function and that semicolon. So what do we want to do? Well, first off, we want to pass in an event. So in this case, the event is going to be the click of a mouse. All right. So a lot of times people will type in E, and they will type right here e.prevent default. And essentially this is a built-in method that prevents a button from refreshing the browser. But for this sake, to make it extra clear, I want to send in a mouse click, and then here we would change this to mouse click. So this prevents the default mouse click behavior when we click a button. So this is not going to refresh the button. All right. And just to make sure it's doing something, let's console log form submitted. Let's save that, and then we can check it over here in this console. So if we type something here, and then we click this to-do button, it should say form submitted down here in the console. There we go, form submitted each time you click it. So that's working. All right, so now I'm going to close this. So when this form is submitted, we want to prevent the page from reloading, and we also want to pass the value that is in the form input. Remember, value equals the value variable right here. Think of it like that. We want to pass that into the add to do function, which we have not created yet. So I am going to type in add to do, and we're going to add to do. There we go. And we're going to pass the value, which we've set up here and we've set down here to add to do. And then once that's passed to it, we want to reset this value so that this is blank, right? We don't want to keep ASD in there. We want it to look nice and blank. So we're going to reset the value to a blank string, and so that will now be empty in the future. So now we need to create this add to do method. So again, I'm going to create a method right here, or a function. So const add to do equals what? Well, we're going to pass it something. We're going to do an arrow function. in, and then that is ready to go. So we're going to be passing a value into this function. So when we click submit, the value is going to go down to here, and we're going to pass it into this function. You can type value here, I guess, if you want, but we want to kind of line it up with this text. So I'm going to call this text right here. So we want to pass in an empty or a filled piece of memory that now has our value in there, but we want to pass that into this function as text. All right. So the first thing we want to do is use our ES6 or ES7, I forget which one it is. We want to spread out the current values in our to-do list, which you do by typing to-do list. So this essentially says take whatever is in this to-do list array and print that out. But then we want to add our text in there, okay? And then we need to give this a name. We need to give this little action a name. So I'm going to call this const updated to-do list equals that. And that's almost ready to go. But remember, this text, it isn't an object up here, so we need to also wrap that in an object, and that should be pretty much ready. So now we've got this new to-do list, which is our old to-do list, plus this new piece of value that we got from right here. So let's set the state for the new to-do list. So we are going to call set to-do list right here, and we are going to pass it the updated to-do list, which we just created right here. Updated to-do list, and that should be good. So now if we come over here and we type something, like let's type in buy a new toothbrush. Now when we click this button, it should reset this form, it should not refresh the page, and it should add this value into this via this method right here, add to do. Let's see. Boom, sweet. And then pet the dog. Cool. And then let's do run 2 miles. Gotcha. So we can just keep adding this. And later on you can go back and kind of redo this CSS if you like to as well. So now let's handle our delete actions, because right now if we click delete, it's not doing anything. All right. So how do we handle this? Well, first of all, we need to build out our delete to do function. So I'm going to come down to this button, and when this button is clicked, so on click, which is a built-in property, we want to do something, and that something is a function. So we want to pass in a value, and we want to call handle delete. Again, that could be called anything, and we want to pass it something, and we want to pass it this to do that we created right here on this map. Right? Each one of these things is called a to-do in this case. So we want to pass this to-do anytime that we delete the actual to-do. All right, so now we need to create this method. It's red, that's because we haven't created it. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to type const handle delete equals what? We want to create something to pass in, do an arrow function, some brackets, and that's good to go. So now we need to handle the delete. So the first thing we want to do is pass in our to-do up here. What we want to do is we want to filter the current to-do list that we have right here. Remember, it's these 3 objects, and now we've added 3 other objects to this over here, okay? So I want to take the current state of the to-do list, all right? So to-do list, and we want to filter it. Now, to filter it, we can pass in the current value. So let's just make up a variable name here. So let's type in the current to-do list values, pass that into a new function. And we want to say current to-do list value does not equal to-do. So basically this is saying we want to print the current to-do list values, which are all these, except for the to-do we pass in. So if we click delete on this one, on this to-do, then we want to print out the current to-do list values except for, but not buy a new toothbrush, okay? And we need to call this something, so let's call this const filtered to-do list. Try and give good variable names. And then what we want to do is we want to set the to-do list now to the filtered to-do list. I see the problem right here. We're getting these because this should not be, once again, an object. It should be parentheses. So now if we hit save, we can type stuff right here. Mow the lawn again. Or we could type in tie my shoes. And now if we click delete, it will delete. So that's how you can create a really easy to-do list in React. Hopefully that was helpful. Again, that is just an overall view, pretty unoptimized version of a to-do list. Normally what you would do was, instead of creating an actual to-do right here, you could create a to-do component and pass in props and all that kind of stuff. But that is how you can use hooks to create a quick to-do list in, 72 odd lines of code or so. Hope that was helpful. Please subscribe. And if you have any questions about React or developing React apps, please reach out. I'm Brandon Stiles. Thanks a lot.